What we're going to be doing today with Jacob is designing something similar to this. This is the Piper kit that Jacob got when he was a little kid. And it's a really neat kit. The box, the quality, I mean it's a neat little project kit. But we're going to be building something a little bit different with Jacob. So the first thing is this box isn't quite big enough because we have a bigger monitor. We've got a 10-inch monitor where this is about a 7-inch monitor. So we need the box to be a little bit bigger than this. And the other problem with this kit is it's about $200 to buy this kit. So it's not a cheap kit. We want to try to keep everything affordable and in addition, I want Jacob to actually get some experience cutting wood and gluing the wood together and doing all of the things to get this box together. So but this is pretty similar to what we're gonna be trying to do. Now, what we're gonna be doing here is we've got our layout here. So we have the front is gonna be 10 inches wide, which is about the same as the Piper box. We're 2 inches deep here, 1 inch deep for the monitor for the top of the box. And then we're 8 inches deep where the Piper box is only about 6 inches deep. And that's really one of the main differences. And again, it's because of the monitor that we're gonna be mounting. So the idea is that Jacob and I are about to go to Home Depot and we're gonna get some wood and supplies. And then we're gonna come back and we're gonna build an enclosed box. And the idea is we're gonna build this thing as a completely closed in box. And then we're gonna cut it, we're gonna mark it and cut it at 1 inch here so that we end up with a top and a bottom that perfectly match together. And then we'll go through and show exactly what Jacob's doing as he's building this. So hopefully Jacob is gonna be able to figure this out. Do you think you can do this? Is this something that's in your wheelhouse?
Yeah.
Are you sure? You don't look very sure. Do you think you can handle this?
Yeah.
Think you can do it? Impress Mama and show her that you can actually do something else better than she can? Huh?
Yeah.
More excitement.
Yeah.
Getting a piece of 1/4 inch plywood here that we're going to be making the box out of.
So we need front and back, the top and bottom, and the sides. We need 2 pieces of each to make this work.
Okay. And so what we're going to be doing now is Jacob is going to go over and we're going to draw out on the piece of plywood that we bought at Home Depot. We're going to draw out 2 pieces that are this size, 2 pieces that are 10 by 3, 8 by 3, and then 2 pieces for the top and bottom that are 10 by 8. And so that's going to be what we do next, and then we're going to cut those out so that we can have some boards to work with. Before we start laying out a bunch of stuff is we need to know how big of the board is that we're working with. And so Jacob is measuring this board, and so how wide is it?
About 24.
24 inches. All right, and so we know that the board is 24 inches, and we know that we need 2 10-inch pieces. So we ought to be able to get a top and a bottom out of this area right here and cut one out over there and one out over here. So we're gonna measure 10 inches over, and then we're gonna measure 10 inches from this side. We'll have a little bit of a strip in the middle. And then we're gonna come up here and we're gonna measure 8 inches this way. And then we'll get the 8 here, 8 and 8, and then we'll draw a line so we get 2 square boxes that are 10 inch by 8 inch.
Make sure this is lined up, because if you don't, and it's it has to be parallel. So if it's out going this way, then it won't make your measurements right.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
So you're gonna put your finger here, line it up right there, and make it straight.
Okay. And we also want to make sure that we're as close to the edge. We need a little bit of room to make our mark, but we want to make sure that we're as close to the edge as possible because we're going to be drawing a box here when we're done. So go ahead and mark 10 inches over there. I'll mark it on the other side, close to the edge of the board. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're gonna come up this way, and we're gonna again make it parallel, and then we're gonna mark 10 inches again. All right, then we're gonna turn the ruler this way, put it on the edge of the board here,
And then make it 8.
and we're gonna make it 8. All right, and then we're gonna come over this way, and we're gonna do the same thing. Okay. It's a little hard to see because it's bright out here. All right, and so now what we're gonna do is, what I want you to do is I want you to take the ruler, and I want you to line the ruler up on that mark and draw a line in between them, and we want the line to come all the way up here to the 8-inch mark. So we're gonna line it up so you can see the mark. So just to show what we're doing here, we want the mark to be so that when the pencil runs down that line, it touches that line and touches, see how it's off of that line, the ruler's off too much, push it over closer to the line. But I wanna see the line, a little bit like right at the edge. All right, and then if you look up here, we're like right on the edge right there. So now we're gonna draw a line from right here all the way down. Draw a line from up here at this side, and we wanna start where our 8-inch mark is, because we're gonna draw a line across the 8-inch mark here in a minute too. So go ahead and go down the ruler.
Ugh.
Okay, and the way that you do this, to hold the ruler right there, the way that you do this to get a nice line all the way down is you hold the ruler and then point the pencil toward the ruler and push into the ruler a little bit, and then make your mark all the way down the edge of that ruler, because we need that line to go all the way to the end of the board, because we're gonna have to cut it. So we wanna make sure that we've got the whole board marked. Do it again just to get it dark. Okay, now I want to show you a trick. So we have a pencil here. Hold the ruler, Jacob. So we have a pencil and we want to draw a line. I'll tell you what, put it right here so we don't have to mess up the line you just made. So we want to draw a line. If I'm going to draw a line from down here to up here, if I lean this pencil into my line, it makes it a lot easier. So what I would do is I would drag it this way, and then I would flip it over and drag it back that way if I'm going back the other way, because then you're not having to push into the lead on the pencil. You just drag it up the thing, turn around and drag it back the other way. Things that helps with marking the ruler is when he makes this mark, he's gonna make the mark coming off at a triangle so that it points at the number 8, because one of the things that's very, very critical is we're making a box, and it's impossible to make a box out of crooked wood. So we want to make sure that all of these measurements are exactly 8 and exactly 10. So take your time and make sure that you get all of this stuff right. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a box that's got a bunch of oblong corners and you can't get everything to match up. So take your time and make sure you're exactly on your measurement. Now that we've measured all that stuff out, we're going to be cheating a little bit. We're actually using a table saw to cut these boards, because we want to make sure that they're exactly the measurement and exactly the length that we need. So the way a table saw works is, first off, and they all have a little bit different way of moving around, but on this particular one, you'll notice that there's a little red line here with a ruler that sits back here in the background. There's a saw that sticks up out of the table, and we will make sure there's an adult around when you're doing this, because we need to be very careful that we don't cut anybody's fingers off. So a couple rules about working with tools like this. One is you don't want to wear gloves, because if your glove were to get stuck in that blade while it's running, it could pull your hand into it. So we're not wearing gloves when we're actually running the saw. And we don't want to wear loose clothes, because if our shirt were to get grabbed by that thing, it could rip you down into the saw as well. So these things are extremely dangerous, and we need to be very careful when we're working them. So make sure that you are very slow and deliberate about everything that we're doing around this saw. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need to cut those pieces off that are 10 inches. So what Jacob's gonna do is on this particular saw, there's a release that actually locks the thing in so that this won't move. And so in order for him to turn the knob, we first have to pull up on this. So grab that knob right there and pull it up. Now you can move that knob and turn it until we get to 10 inches. And then get it exactly on 10. No, you got to get it on, not on the number 10, on the line that's just past 10. Because the 10 is just a number. I want it exactly. Exactly on 10. That's still not there. Needs to go to the right just a little bit. There you go. Okay, and now come over here and push that knob down because we want to lock it. All right, now, the next thing that we got to do is we're going to pick the blade up. Right now we have the blade all the way down inside the table because we were using it as a table a minute ago. So what we got to do is turn. There's a knob somewhere on the saw that will pick that blade up. So turn it that way. It's a little hard to turn, but just turn it. And as you turn it, you'll notice that the blade is going to start coming up. See it coming up out of the table?
Yeah, this is hard.
Yep. Now we want that blade to just come up enough to get through our wood, and that's probably good enough. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is go over there and get the ruler, and we want to check and make sure that this is going to give us our 10 inches. So what we're going to do is you have to think about what's going on. So we're going to be pushing our board up against this, and then we're going to be cutting across the saw, and the saw blade is actually going to cut out some of the wood. So we don't want to measure to the center of the saw blade. We want to measure to the edge of the saw blade. So we want to make sure that when we measure over to those teeth, that those teeth are going to be right on 10 inches. So, and you also, again, need to make sure that you're parallel when you're doing this. So as an example, like Jacob was saying earlier, if you come in here crooked, you notice what our measurement is. It's a lot off of 10. But if I come over here and straighten the ruler up, it actually puts those teeth right at the edge of our material, which is what we want. We want to cut so that when that blade cuts through the wood, we're left with 10 inches of wood left on the board. Okay, so you'll notice here that we have our board that we're going to be making our box out of, and we have it laid up here on the saw just to make sure that the teeth are going to go through the board when we run it across the saw. So we want to check that and make sure that our teeth are high enough, because if they're not, then we're going to end up having to make 2 cuts, and we don't really want to do that. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this board and we're going to get it on the back side of the teeth so it's not touching the teeth. And we also want to make sure that it is parallel with this board up here. So get on the other side so you can see over here. So we want to make sure that this board is parallel and touching this. So if you watch this, if I cock it, you see how it's not touching all the way across the board. It's off a little bit. And what that means is when I go to cut the board's not going to cut straight. It's going to end up cutting crooked. So we want to make sure that we cut with this thing all the way up against this fender as we slide this thing across. And we want to keep it that way. So as we're sliding the board across, we don't want to wiggle it across and make it do this as it's moving across the fender, because it'll end up cutting the board all crooked. Now, do you notice something else? And this is why it's nice to, even though we have the table saw, it's nice to go ahead and draw your lines on your board, because take a look at what we've done here and see if you see anything wrong. Do you see anything wrong, Jacob?
This is not lined up with that.
It's not lined up with that. And the reason is because we measured 10 inches this way, and this way is how many inches?
Didn't we measure that 8?
8. So this is supposed to be 8 inches, and this is 10. So we're going to need the 10 in a minute. But right now we need to go back and set the saw back to 8 inches because we're about to make a mistake. But see, if you hadn't drawn your line here, you'd forget about that, and then you'd have a mess. little bit more. That's too much. Right, right, a little bit right there. All right, and then lock it. If you don't remember to lock it, you're gonna have a really bad problem. Push it down. Because if you don't lock it, then that thing will move while you're running your board down through here. All right, now I'm gonna cut the board, and depending on your age, when you go to do this, we're gonna measure this thing one more time, make sure that we're right on 8 inches, and then we'll cut the board, and Jacob can videotape me cutting the board until Jacob gets it. Now we got that piece cut. So now Jacob is going to turn the saw back over here to 10 inches. And a little bit more. Come back this way a little bit. Right there. Whoop, too much. You got to make sure you get it right on it. So we're going to get it right on. All right, so lock that. All right, so now we got the saw set for 10 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the board this way, and we're going to let Jacob cut this one because he can actually hold it. So now, here are the rules. Number one, we have to hold this square over here. If you start pushing the board and you start letting it wiggle, you see how it's coming off the fender over there?
Yeah.
That's going to make the line crooked. So we got to hold it over there. The other rule is that this hand and this hand cannot get anywhere around this blade. So you have to hold your hands out away from the blade, and you cannot forget that this blade is turning. So when you get to the end of the metal over here, you want to keep pushing that board until it gets past the end of the blade so that the blade doesn't catch it and throw it back at you. And I'm going to help you do this, but and then we're going to push it through, keep your hands away, and when the saw is finished cutting, you're going to pick your hands straight up away from the saw and back up away from it, and then hit the power button down here to turn it off. Okay, so keep your hands back here on the back because we have to push. If you're holding your hands like this, if you're pushing and your hand slides on top of the metal, on top of the wood, you want your hand to kind of cup around the end of the board so that you have that board good. You don't have to hold your hand quite up against because we need to see this. Okay, and then the other thing that's very important is before we turn this saw on, we want to make sure this board is back away from that blade because we don't want that thing touching when we turn the saw on. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, so we're just going to push it through. Keep pushing. Thing we're going to do is we're going to use a different measuring device. This is a square, and we're going to use it to actually do the measurements on the smaller pieces. So to use this, you're going to loosen this tab, this nut right here. So we're going to unscrew it. You don't have to unscrew it much, just a little bit. Okay, and now this should slide. You have to grab it, you got to keep it straight. So if you grab it right here and just kind of pull it straight across, there you go. But we want to go back to 3 because our next pieces that we got to cut are going to be 3 inches thick. So look, if you hold it like this and just kind of push it with your thumb a little bit at a time, then it'll be a little easy. You got to push it straight. So look at how this ruler works. See that side is flat here? Mm-hmm. You see that side's got a groove in the middle? There's a little tab inside of here that's running up and down that groove. And so if you try to push it crooked, it won't run up and down the groove. So we gotta push it nice and easy and go straight. And then we're gonna get it right on the 3, a little bit before the 3. And then we're gonna tighten up our nut. So a little hard to do with one hand, but all right, so that's gonna get us our 3 inches. So now we're gonna use this to do our measuring. So now take the square over to your board. Where'd our pencil go?
It should be under that board.
All right. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we need a front, a back, and then two sides. So we're gonna have, what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the width across this way to make our pieces. So we're gonna take our square and we're gonna square this up and we're gonna bump it up against the plywood right here, and then we're just gonna mark the end of the ruler. So go ahead and get your pencil and mark the end of the ruler.
Right here?
No, the end of the ruler. All right, and then we're gonna come over here and do it again. And then do another one right here. So the reason that you have to do multiple ones is if you don't have a long enough ruler to go all the way across. Let's do one more. But we actually have a ruler long enough. So now we're gonna take this and we're gonna take our longer ruler and we're gonna line those marks up. So line your mark up over on your side. Get it right where you can barely see it so the pencil goes right over the top of it. And then we gotta hold that ruler down tight and then drag your pencil like we were doing earlier. So you're gonna drag it to you, but you gotta go all the way to the edge of the board. You don't start there.
Here.
Yeah, all the way to the edge and then all the way to the edge over here. So just hold that ruler with your left hand, don't let go of it. And then keep it coming. Keep it coming all the way till it drags off the end of the board. All right, so there's your line for the height, okay? Now, what are our measurements on these? We need 2 of them that are 8 inches and 2 of them that are 10 inches, right? So we're gonna have to cut twice. We can't get all 4 of them out of this piece. We're gonna end up cutting one more row up here. But for right now, we're only gonna do these 2. So do you wanna do the 10-inch pieces right now or the 8-inch? 8. So then what we wanna do is take this ruler and measure 8 inches. We need 2 lines. I need an 8-inch mark here and an 8-inch mark here so that we can draw. Now with this square that we have, we don't really need but one mark. And I'll show you why. So instead of having to line up 2 sides of the ruler.
Right here?
Yep, just do your little triangle. Nope, start at the 8 and drag down, and then start at the 8, drag down. And now watch. You take this guy, put him up, line him up with the edge of the board, and put it on the mark, and now do your line. All right, so now we need to do one more over here. So let's go ahead and measure 8 inches from this side, and then we'll cut those 2 pieces. This is interesting. From here, 8 inches. We're trying to cut the other side of the piece out. And you also got to pay attention that your inches are up here on this side, and this side's coming from 0. So you can't measure 8 inches from here unless you're going to do the math, which you can do. What's 18? So this is 18 out here. So what's 18 minus 8 inches?
0.
18 minus 8 inches.
Oh, that would be 10.
10. So if you come over here to the 10, and you'll notice the 10 and the 8 line up with each other. So just mark your 10. Okay. And now use your square to put it over there and mark the line coming down the other way. So we're going to put the square up against, and look, hold it up there. Hold it up there. You got to make sure you're lined up all the way across here and all the way over there. And then move your finger out of the way because you're going to hit your finger. Okay. So now we have our marks on here that we need to make. So what we're going to do now is Jacob's going to hold the phone, and I'm going to cut these out real quick. Okay, lock the saw. All right. So loosen it up. All right. All right, then we need 10 inches from the other end. So what we're doing to put these boards together is we have to cut some grooves in these boards so that we can slide them onto the top and bottom. We want the top and bottom to actually sit in these grooves. And so what we've done is, you'll notice that we've got a little bit of a groove in these boards that we want this board, the top and bottom, to slide inside of, but the top and bottom's a 1/4 inch thick, and this is only 1 blade width thick. So we're probably going to have to do this 3 times before we get this thing wide enough. And hopefully, you know, this is all an experiment and project, so it may be that we end up with a box that's a little bit too thin and we have to make this again, but it's not a big deal, just part of the process. So what we're going to do now is we have set the saw so that the fence is just far enough off the edge of the board that we don't bust the board out when we're cutting this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move the fence a little bit far, 1 blade width that far that way, so that we end up, when we cut this, we're going to end up cutting into the inside here, and we're going to keep cutting this board this way until the top and bottom will slide down in that groove. So we're going to get Jacob over here and we're going to move this fence. So right now we are sitting on about 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to move this, Jacob, over to the right, about right at the 3/16 mark. So see if you can get that on 3/16. So just look right here, we want it on 3/16. So right now we're on 2/16. We want it on right, go back the other way a little bit, back this way. We want it on that 3/16 mark, right there. All right, and then lock it. All right, so we're just gonna keep cutting these grooves until we get the groove wide enough for our board, our top and bottom of our board. All right, so now we have our grooves cut in here. And then Jacob, if you'll hold that bottom up, that top up right there, just to show how this goes in here. So what's gonna happen, this is the long side. So you'll see how the groove slides into the board slides into the groove there. And so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get us a little set up here on the table and get all this glued together so we can let it be drying, and then we'll come back and finish it up tomorrow. Okay, so we're gonna take this apart and show how it all goes together here, but we've got everything cut. Now we've got to actually go back and glue everything together. So we're gonna have to take the whole box back apart and glue everything, and then we'll leave it out for the night, and tomorrow we'll come back and cut the top off of it so that we've actually got 2 pieces that we can use. So what we have is we'll take this piece off first here. So when we pull this off, you'll notice that we have a groove here that's the width of the piece of plywood, and you can use any size plywood you want. We're using 1/4 inch here. The 1/4 inch is a little harder to work with because it's so thin, but it also gives you a lighter box when you're done. So you'll notice we got a groove all the way across the bottom and all the way across here. We ended up cutting a little bit, and I'll give the final measurements of all this before we put it all together. But we ended up cutting a little bit off of this length and a little bit off the back of the length to the other side. And the reason is because we want these pieces to go up inside of the top piece. So it's gonna actually go in here like this. So these pieces were cut off a little bit shorter to allow them to fit on the inside edge of the front and the back. And then the other thing that we did is the front, or the top and the bottom, we ended up cutting a little bit off of this length, the length from here to here, so that when we put this on here with the grooves, it ends up being the right length. Now, the problem here is you kind of have to just eyeball how thick you want to put this, because we really just want to have enough here for the board to bite into. But you know, my measurements, if you don't cut this groove exactly the depth that I cut it, you're going to end up being a little bit off. So you may, when you build these, you may need to play, you know, go back and forth and play with it. But what you want to do, and just to be clear, is I've got paper down here on the table because we're fixing to be doing glue, and I don't want to get glue everywhere. But you want to fully assemble this box using some clamps and figure out how you're going to hold this together before you start putting glue on it. So don't put glue on it until you know how you're going to clamp it and how you're going to hold it together, because we need this thing clamped really good and tight before we leave it for the night. So we're going to get everything prepared here, and then we're going to go through and start gluing all the components together, and then we'll put it together for one last assembly. But everything, and just also consider this, you can't put this piece on, this front piece, you can't put this piece on until after you have slid this top piece in here, because you'll notice it slides in these grooves all the way back and then slides into the groove on the back here. So we can't put this top piece has to go in first, and then your last piece that you're going to put on is going to be the front or the side, depending on whichever one you pick to be the last one. But the top piece has to go in before you actually put that final side on, or you're going to have a problem and won't be able to put the box together. All right, so what Jacob's doing now is we just got a cup of glue, and just turn it and push it down in you can just set it down in the hole there, and then just drag it all the way, just cover it in glue. But we don't, so here's the trick about glue. You don't want a ton of glue in there, because if you get too much glue, it just squeezes all out and goes everywhere. But you do want enough glue in there that you cover all the wood, so that when we put all this together, it's got a nice strong bond. So this, if you think you're gonna wipe the glue off later, it's very, very difficult to do a good job doing that. So it's better to only put enough glue in there to get you a good seal, but not make a complete mess. So we have the box all put together. We got the glue on everything. We got everything clamped down. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna let this thing sit here overnight, and then tomorrow, what the plan is we're gonna come in, we're gonna mark down about 1 inch off the top lip, and we're gonna cut this off, cut it all the way around, and then we will have hopefully a lid and then the bottom case, and hopefully it'll be big enough to hold the components and stuff that we want to put in it. But that is phase 1 of the build. Wasn't too bad. Jacob got a little bit of practice using a ruler and marking and cutting and getting stabbed by a saw and all that good stuff. So all in a day's good work.